instead of saying, I disagree with you on this, I've started saying, help me understand, ...
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of that is when I go to ask someone, I used to ask their advice. I don't ask their advice. I ask their perspective because they get offended if I take their advice and don't do it.
That's great.
But instead, I need your perspective, or help me understand how you would make that decision.
That's fantastic.
Instead of like, you idiot, what did you do?
Right.
You know. Welcome to Under the Knife, the podcast where we cut into topics such as politics, life advice, and medicine, and we do this with the precision of a licensed orthopedic surgeon. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Greene, an orthopedic surgeon and elected public official. Rufus, thanks for being here.
You bet.
Tell us, give us 1 minute on Rufus.
1 minute on Rufus. Professionally or personally?
Both.
Both. All right. So I live in Destrehan, Louisiana. I got 4 children. I got, she's 30, 34, a 23, and 2 12-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
So we spread them out. It
That
works
runs
really
the
well.
spectrum?
It works really well. So if we, got built-in babysitters, so that worked out really well for us. Been married to Lisa over 20 years. I'm sure if I can do the math on it, but it hasn't quite been 24 years. So we actually did things opposite. So we had our daughter Shelby. So my oldest is my stepdaughter, but my daughter Shelby. And then we bought a house, and then we got married. So people usually do it the other way around.
Yeah.
But
You still have all 3, though.
Oh yeah. Still have all 3. Still, yeah. So
Sometimes when you get them out of order, you lose some.
No. I think that's what made it work for us. But so I've been doing financial advice for 26 years.
How'd you get into that space?
My father's a CPA, so I went to college for accounting, and just really wasn't something that I had a real passion for. So I took the accounting credits that I had from college, and I just applied to finance. So, all right, any business can use accounting, any business can use finance. So I just knew I wanted to be in business in some degree.
Isn't the origin of accounting the monks and how they kept track of things? Is that right?
The abacus or something? I have no idea.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
That's okay. I'll have to go look that up later. But with the credits that I put towards finance, I just ultimately just kind of landed ass backwards into the financial advisor role, because I wound up applying for a company called American Express Financial Advisors. What the job I really wanted was with other firms that were more known in the stockbroker realm, and they all wanted a certain amount of experience, and I'm like, right out of college. I remember even going to one interview, and have 2 nickels to rub between, and I'm paying to go to this paid parking downtown in New Orleans, and go into this interview. I probably borrowed a tie. I probably didn't even know a tie at the time. And he's asking these questions, and it was like a 5-minute interview, and he's like, yeah, we usually look for people that are about 5 years of experience. I'm like, you couldn't told me this over the phone?
Right.
Do y'all validate? Because I don't even know how I'm going to get out my car out of here. So it was one of those things. So the job I really didn't want was the American Express job, because I'm like, I couldn't delineate between financial advisor and the credit card company, because they were owned. And ultimately what happened was American Express had bought a company called IDS, which is in 1892 was founded. So they changed the name, and then eventually they spun them off to Ameriprise. But it was because I didn't want that job. I was so relaxed in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
I was very kind of, I'm just telling stories from college. I'm just shooting the shit with the hiring manager, and like that Rufus, he's a good communicator. Yeah. He's a real straight shooter. So, but it turns out that was such a different company that suited me so well because of my creative mind. I didn't know who I was or who I was going to become. And I knew there were certain things that was different about me, but I didn't know how to really articulate that.
How did you? Let's dig that in.
Mm-hmm.
Dig into that. How did you find out you were creative? Because creative in the accounting space seems like not a good fit.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And even in the financial space, like how have you been able to find and nurture that, and how has it impacted your profession?
I was always was into art, building. I mean, as long as I can remember, I was borrowing my father's hammer and stealing bent nails from job sites to build clubhouses.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always creating. So when I understood the financial planning versus just being a traditional stockbroker was a lot of professional problem solving, taking a big mess and just kind of reshaping it and building something,
giving it order,
plan, and then communicating that. It was just I could see the pieces come together. I have the discernment skills that other people can't really see. And as I learn more and more, I think that has to do with ADHD that I probably have that was never diagnosed as a child, but is because I can see things so clearly because I can't see what other people see. And I think that's ultimately you start nurturing that, and it was just something that I just was just very natural at it. So, and I took a lot of pride in it. And I enjoy my creations. I enjoy being significant in the lives of the clients that I serve, to where, I'm on that top 5 list of people they call if something good happens and something bad happens, right?
Yeah.
So
now, I think life is self-discovery, and I think there's milestones where you reflect, and that enables you, and you look inward, and then you adjust, right? Me just describing that to you, let's say age 30 or 40, whatever. Tell us some of your discoveries that you reflected upon and discovered.
I mean, as a reply to business, or
both?
Okay, so I think, well, I mean, part of what I do is part of my identity, so it's kind of hard to make the difference. But I think the routine, I was getting bored with certain day in, day out, the rinse and repeat kind of side of things. And I started to really, at the time there was not a whole lot of models to really follow. And I started to understand that if you wanted to double your success, you wanted to double your income, you had to work twice as hard. And you kind of look at it from even from a doctor. If a doctor wants to double their income, they got to work more hours, see more patients, or they can just charge higher fees. But eventually, if you go too high, you price yourself out of the market. So I said, well, how do I really scale this? I'm like, well, there's a difference between being self-employed and being a business owner. And the business owner owns a system where other people are employed, and the harder they work, the more people you get to work for you, the more you can start to scale there. So it'd be almost like from a doctor owning a hospital where other doctors work and say, okay, I get an override on whatever the revenue of all the doctors are. So I don't know if it's how it works in the medical industry, but I would imagine in my mind it does. So that's what I started to kind of really pursue and just become a student of business. And I think that was extremely fascinating to understand the difference. So I took a lot of different risks that most people would never do. And started.
But they were calculated risks.
Yeah, I mean, risk of like, I want this, I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, and just exactly plug there. And just pick up the pieces and try again. And so wisdom doesn't come easily or cheaply. So God knows that's before I discovered I could get it a whole lot easier if I go read books and find coaches and mentors and model other people. So that was kind of the pivoting point of saying, so I started on this pursuit of trying to figure out, how do I become a better business owner versus becoming a better certified financial planner. I enjoy what I do as a planner. I'm very good at what I do as a planner, but I get bored with things. And I think the challenge of making progress and growing and building something is just something that suits me.
Well, what are you reading now?
What am I reading now? Actually, the last book I just completed, I read it the second time, was The Go-Giver. And that's...
We've had a theme today.
Yeah. So, well, I know that there's people, that we started a little book club. And part of the idea behind that was, when you read something and you get some great wisdom, then it's like, wow, that was great. And then life gets in the way, and you just kind of forget it. So I really wanted to start applying some of these things. I really wanted to start anchoring it. So how do you do that? Well, you start talking about it, start talking it, and people can remember stories. So I want to hear from other people what they got out of the book and how they're going to apply it, and I can start to remember those
and that'll
things.
stick.
That story.
You remember Bob said this about that book.
I can remember stories from 40 years ago. I can't remember text that I written or read. So it's just one of those things that it anchors it for me, and I thought that was a good idea to start that. So that was one that I just recently finished. But gosh, I can pull it.
How do y'all pick books for the book club?
That's what we're actually going to discuss. The first one we did last month was a book by Dan Sullivan called 10X is Easier Than 2X, which was mind-blowing, really was, and just a great way to think. And Ben Hardy, who co-wrote the book, did some really good work with that and pulling a lot of Dan Sullivan's teachings in that. So we started with that because I knew it was going to be such a hit, and I think everybody
Let
really
me just get your
appreciated
perspective on that, just to interrupt for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my prior guests has said, 2X, you can just, and you just mentioned this, you can just work a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't work a little harder to get to 10X. You have to
Right.
have a different paradigm.
Oh, absolutely.
And that
Right.
usually involves us being outside of our comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
because we get super comfortable,
Right. Well, again, not to go too far down that rabbit hole with that, but the whole idea is that 80-20 rule, that Pareto principle that says we get comfortable in that 80%.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we know. It's our routine, and people are very, very comfortable with and feel safe in those routines. So it's really easy for the majority of the people out there just to kind of be on that linear path.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll still find success, and that's okay. And not everybody has to be a 10X person,
Right.
but the person that does want the 10X, they do need to figure out what their unique ability is, what that 20% of their business is, and that's where they need to start focusing and just dismissing all the other 80%, and that's where things start to compound.
I'm glad you said, too, not everybody has to do that because that's not inside of everybody to have a 10X. And I think for, I don't want to say high achievers, but for people that are motivated to do the 10X of whatever they're doing, and I think I'm kind of that way, you're kind of that way, I think there's something about the challenge and the unknown space of creativity that draws us into that. Do you think that, or?
Oh, I agree. No, and look, me and my wife discuss this, and I think what makes it such a great marriage is that we're so opposite of one another, but in so many ways. And we were even, our latest discussion is our middle daughter saying, okay, is she more like me? Is she more like you? Because my wife doesn't quite understand me. She feels that I'm the kind of person that's just never going to be satisfied because there's never going to be enough. There's never going to be a finish line. And I have to constantly remind her, says, that's just how I'm wired. It says, but there's nothing wrong with me. I enjoy that. The fun and success for me is making the progress. I'm the kind of person that will reach the top of that mountain and only to get a different point of view than everybody else does. Says, well, look at all those other mountains.
Right.
That one looks like fun.
Let's go climb that one.
I'm gonna, for no other reason that it's a taller one and it looks like fun.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go on that pursuit. Whether I get there to the top or
It's
not,
a journey.
It is. So I really try to make sure that I stay grateful during the way, because there's so many cool things that are happening on this journey that if you're waiting to fill this void with some level of success that you've reached at a finish line, it's never going to happen. So I sometimes envy, and I have to admit, I do envy the people who can be so content with less. And I don't mean that as in a pretentious or an arrogant way. It's just something that's like,
They may have a secret sauce.
I don't know, but it's just like their ambition is just not there. But I have to just recognize they're winning at their own story. They're winning at their own game. I would never win at their game, but then again, they're never going to win at mine. We're all playing our individual game, and I think that's where you just recognize that just some people are the way I am, some people are the way
How old were you think, when you discovered who you were?
I'm still
and could articulate it.
I'm still figuring it out. No, it's really who I am. That's a tough one. I mean, it's let me answer it a different way. In college, I started to figure out there was some kind of an it factor. Just being in fraternity, being around another
Where were you
group.
where at college?
At UL.
Okay.
Yeah, it was USL.
What fraternity?
So I was in Lambda Chi
Okay.
Alpha. Yeah. So so I was always gravitated towards leadership and trying to rally people towards a common cause, where other people were just kind of there for the obvious
Party.
reasons, right? And I'm there too. I want to have fun, but what was it about me that gave a shit more than the people that didn't? Where was this passion coming from? And I tried to uncover that. I didn't understand it. It was very difficult for me to see the potential in certain people and them not live up to that expectation. So it took many, many years to kind of understand what that it factor was. And it's really only over the last couple of years did I really understand that it is this a very low percentage of people that have that driven gene, that driven personality.
Because that's how you were born.
And that's just, yeah. So, well, believe it or not, when you start to understand these things about you, there's a certain shame you start to let go of. And that's weird. You know, shame is, guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me, right?
Big difference.
So it is a big difference. So carrying shame is very, very hard, because you're saying, why am I not like everybody else? Why can't I be satisfied with less? Why can't I be more grateful? Or why can't I be less ambitious, or just be in the moment more? Or why can't I stay focused? And it's just because that's just not how you are.
How did you get rid of the shame?
Understanding that this is
you're unique.
Finding other people that were like me.
Yeah.
I think finding my tribe, right? And I found it through, believe it or not, through the implementation of the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. So, and one of the roles, some people in business call it a CEO, they call it a visionary. I'm like, interesting, visionary. Well, that sounds kind of a cool title. So you uncover that and you say, okay, visionary is not just a title, it's kind of a personality trait for me. It's basically that shiny object, that ADD kind of that FOMO gene, right? There's like there's always something more, and when you can find other people, so we start having these focus groups and these different peer groups, and you start talking to other people, and they get you, man. They get you, and not only do they get you, but they energize you, they compound you.
Like-mindedness.
So, absolutely. So that's where you start shedding that shame that says, there's nothing wrong with these people. These are great people.
And I'm not the only one.
I'm not the only one. I'm just not like the majority of people. So so that was kind of that self-discovery. So
that's a beautiful story. One of the things you just mentioned too was it reminded me of the book The Gap and the Gain. Have you read that?
That's a Dan Sullivan book.
Yeah.
So Ben Hardy co-wrote that one as well. Absolutely.
So what's next on your reading list?
The next one, I got to look at my. Okay, that's funny. So I got to look at my Audible wish list because I was even telling someone wanted me to read like the first few chapters of their book that they're writing, a peer of mine, and I said, this looks all really good. It's coming along nice. I says, but I can tell you, there's 100% probability that I will read your book if it's on Audible. I says, I can still to this day count on one hand how many books I've read cover to cover.
Well, it's funny. The guys, we have a little, not as formal as you, of a book club. I have, my vernacular for it is very precise. And if I say I just finished this book, I'm not claiming that I read it.
Yeah.
I just finished it. Or I'm in the middle of. Now, if I say I read this book, I read it.
Right.
If I say I finished it, or one of my favorite books in the past year has been, that's probably an audio book, which I just use iTunes, the books app, the iBooks app. But I probably a book a week, just driving, exercising. Yeah. And what I love, and you mentioned this about stories, and I love the fact that the book club is like, tell me a story how this book impacted you, because a lot of, especially Christian or self-help books, they have one point and they repeat it 10 times. Yeah. And you're like, well, do you have anything else? Yeah. And I think that's why the Bible used parables, or you remember stories that are attached to principles.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's, I would recommend, have y'all done any Jordan Peterson books?
Jordan Peterson sounds familiar. Give me the
12 Rules for Life, Beyond Order. It's a lot to chew on, but it's really good.
I'm going to write that down after. So, yeah, choosing a book, it really just depends on kind of where I am, where my headspace is at. I started to get into Enlightenment and stuff by Joe Dispenza, which is like deep stuff, right? Understanding how the brain works and behavioral things, and that's really fascinating to me. And that's a part of that self-discovery. Other things like The Go-Giver, for example, is just a certain frame of mind that says, give value, be your authentic self, all these great things that are just kind of sharpening the saw of things that you already know. Other things are just in the business. So, for example, I read a couple of books recently on how to build a world-class client experience. And for me, that's very important with the business right now and trying to rebrand ourselves with this client intimacy space. And so it just really depends, like I said, on the headspace. I mean, every now and then I'll read something on sales, so I can go work with my younger advisors to say, okay, let's go do this. But right now I'm actually going back through and wanting to sharpen the saw on some other things. And I think that's what this book club for me is going to help out with, is to say, all right, this was really fun the first time. I want to go back and learn it again. Let's do this one. So that's going to be my bias.
Well, I'll tell you, another one of my favorites is Walter Isaacson. Okay. And he's a biographer mainly. He wrote Steve Jobs, The Innovators. One of my favorites, though, is Einstein. His Da Vinci book is really good, too. Okay. But my takeaway from Einstein was that Einstein was constantly curious and willing to challenge the status quo, which I think is important in like my government role. We should kind of leave the R's and D's at the side and be curious about solutions for complex problems. But it sounds like too, at pivotal points of our lives, if you're different, you feel a shame of nonconformity.
Yes.
However, most of that difference is not to be anti or opposite of the majority. It's just a curiosity that gets expressed in life, right? And I think that in those curiosities is gold.
Genuine curiosity. I mean, that's look. I like what you're saying. I mean, I love the idea. Einstein was a disruptor. Steve Jobs was a disruptor. Elon Musk was a disruptor. So I loved hearing about, because I remember going to New York before Uber, and I remember going to New York right after Uber, and I was so happy that they just disrupted that cab industry, right? It's like, oh, we're walking a block, let's get an Uber. It's only a couple of bucks, you know? So things like that was great for us. So when you're saying, you know, R's and D's and when in politics, it's people need to kind of identify themselves as something, and they have to take on sometimes the full identity as the only two options. And it's like, no, you don't. You know, and I'm to this. I use a Samsung Android. Why? Because it's not Apple. Now, I'll probably miss out on some great Apple experiences, but I can't stand how people identify themselves as an Apple, you know? Now, that being said, I would love to have my clients brand Waterfront Wealth Management and tattoo it on them, but like Harley Davidson was able to get it done. So, you know, I do appreciate the brand loyalty and people identifying and affiliating to a tribe, but from a standpoint of politics, it's like, because you're in this camp, because you're in this tent, therefore you have to believe what we believe. If not, then you're over here. So people will overcompensate and says, hey, and just so you know, I'm being really woke and I'm being really politically correct over here in this tent, so don't kick me out of my tribe. And it's just, I just don't.
Well,
have
I've
time
experienced
for it.
that because, you know, I'm more of an issue person, and I think I've upset some of my party. I'm a Republican because I don't show up to an issue and turn to the party and say, what should I think about this? I'm going to do the discovery and on my own. And I think that's what makes me a conservative, is that we're willing to have critical thinking and call people out on our own ideas. And it's like Abraham Lincoln said, there's usually thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And the only way you get to a super sharp idea is to be sharpened. And that's by the dialogue that can occur for, you know, solutions around complex problems that we may have a difference of opinion on.
You know, like in my office space, we have a very well-diverse group of political affiliations, and that's something that I really appreciate, the dialogue and the discussions. We don't try to engage in them too much because we don't want to get people too fired up over anything, but a lot of times I'll go in to one of my advisor, Ellen, and her office, and just say, this is what's going on. Here's kind of how I'm receiving it. This is how it's registering with me. What am I missing from your point of view? And she'll share that, and it's like, okay, that's really good, because I would not have looked at it through that lens.
Well, and I like the way you approach that too, because I've implemented this in the last couple of years, and it's made the confrontations I have go much more smoothly. First of all, I say, all right, we need to have a difficult conversation, and everybody, okay, on alert. Works everywhere. Mostly in marriage it works, but not all the time. But secondly, say, do you want it straight or sugar coated? And what does everybody say? Give it to me straight. But then instead of saying I disagree with you on this, I've started saying, help me understand ... And the flip side of that is when I go to ask someone, I used to ask their advice. I don't ask their advice. I ask their perspective, because they get offended if I take their advice and don't do it.
That's great.
But instead, I need your perspective, or help me understand how you would make that decision.
That's fantastic.
Instead of like, you idiot, what did you do?
Right.
You know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great approach, obviously, to engaging with someone and just kind of getting the right headspace so that they meet you and it's more productive. But actually, one of my favorites, well, and I'll go back to that in a second, but you got to recognize that everybody's greatest desire is to be right. And it's not shelter,
do you mean
it's not love, it's not relationships. It's right. The right, what I'm right, what's in my head, what the narrative that I have in my head, that I'm right. So you have to be sensitive to that. You know, if they're wrong, you know, even you know, tell my team, I says, is the customer always right? Of course not. So, but if they're wrong, let them be wrong with dignity.
Right.
Just kind of empathize and care. But no. So I try to approach it with what you're saying is completely true, just not truly complete. That always kind of lightens the mood a little bit. Yeah. So you're not saying you're wrong, but there's maybe some pieces that you might be missing.
There. Well, you mentioned about being right or affirmed. I've gotten a little into meditation. There's Eastern where there's a chant, and this is more. It came from the Catholic faith, centering prayer, where you spend 20 minutes a day, twice a day in silence, and it takes till about minute 12 until you feel like, wait a minute, I have this consternation of anxiety about whatever. And you can feel it in your stomach or your heart or your head, whatever. But it's coming from one of three things or places. Usually it's either an unhealthy desire for control, an unhealthy desire for affirmation, or an unhealthy desire for security, which is money. And one of those three things, you can usually, any situation that has produced this anxiety is usually back to one of those. And for me, it was always affirmation. I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, I've recognized the type. Yeah. So that's really good. I look forward to watching this back and making some notes there, because I think that's a great perspective, because you can be usually rooted into one of those three things. But I'm learning to let go of what other people think, and that's why I said I'm recovering. I know. I'm in recovery. It's a process. It's tough, but seeking the approval of probably started with your parents, and then just move on to your peers. And I mean, that's the greatest fear that people have, is being kicked out of their community. So
out of the tribe,
you have to conform. I mean, that's just a basic wiring that we all have. Absolutely.
Rufus, I'm so glad you came today, and let's do it again sometime, and let's keep the flow of information of books going back and forth.
Yeah, I look forward to comparing notes with you there, because if anything that you feel really passionate about that you want me to read, I will promise you I will read it.
Check out 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order.
Absolutely.
Jordan Peterson.
Will do.
Great seeing you. Thanks for being here.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this surgical exploration of politics, healthcare, and life. I've been your host, Dr. Craig Greene. Remember to stay informed, stay sharp, and join us next time to see which of life's topics we'll dissect under the knife.